So a few months ago, this politician, James Tellerico, joined Joe Rogan on his podcast, and he made some pretty crazy claims about Jesus. One, he said that Jesus never condemned homosexuality, and two, that the Bible doesn't condemn abortion. And this is not a political podcast. It's not a political channel. I don't want it to be. But when you make these kind of claims about Jesus, about who he was and what he did, now you're encroaching on my territory, or at least on New Testament studies territory. And I feel like it's important to push back. And just so you know, my credentials, because anyone can say anything these days, right? I am a New Testament studies PhD student. And so I spend the bulk of my time studying the historicity of Jesus. You can check out my other videos if you want to see that's the case. I try and look at Jesus's life from a historic lens and ask the question, can we use historical methodology to prove the key events, or to look at the probability of the key events in Jesus's life? So this is what I enjoy doing. This is kind of my area of study. And so I'm not making stuff up when I say this stuff. But before I get into the details of, okay, claim 1, claim 2, James said this, here's why he's wrong, because he is wrong about his claims about Jesus and the Bible. Before I get to that, I have kind of a bigger complaint, a bigger issue with what people like James are doing. Because for the past 2,000 years, there's been almost unanimous agreement on some of these topics between Eastern Orthodox, Catholic, Protestants. Now, Protestants are a newer branch, right? It's only a couple hundred years since the Reformation. But the unanimous agreement across Christianity from the beginning has always been on these two topics, that abortion and homosexuality are sinful. But in the past 50 years, something has changed, where in our modern cultural mindset, what used to happen is if people disagreed with Christianity, they would just say, okay, I disagree with Christianity. I don't want to be a Christian. That's not for me. Sure, maybe some things that Jesus taught was interesting, or maybe I agree with this idea of love and forgiveness, but generally speaking, not for me. Over the past 50 years, and especially in like the last few years, instead of saying Christianity is not for me because there's certain things I disagree with, they want to change Christianity and morph it to match their own preferences and desires. And I feel like that's what James is doing here. He's taking historic Orthodox Christianity and he's saying, you know what, I don't like this, let's take this out, but still call myself a Christian. And my question is, why? What's the point? Like, I read things from Confucius. I really think Confucius is an interesting guy. That doesn't make me a follower of Confucius. I don't have to, because I read him and think that he's got some interesting things to say that I like, doesn't mean that I agree with everything Confucius has to say. You don't have to be a Christian to like Jesus, or you don't have to be a Christian to agree with certain things that Jesus taught. And so I'm still left with this question of, why bother? Why are you reinterpreting Christianity to fit your preference when you could just say, nah, Christianity is not for me? And the only answer that I can think of is it's political. It's, instead of James looking at Christianity and saying, I either agree or disagree with Christianity, he's saying, you know what, if I can have the title of, and I cannot see people's motives, right? But I can't think of another reason that someone would do this except for ulterior motives. And James is like, if I can just have the title of Christian, maybe I can get some conservative support because all they see is I express with my mouth that I'm a Christian, but then I still hold all of my liberal ideals about abortion and homosexuality, and so I still get my support from the Democrats. And I'm just like, stop, please. Like, the only reason that I'm creating this video is because people want to redefine Christianity. Like, I would leave it alone if it didn't get Christianity involved. But as soon as you start saying Jesus said this, Jesus taught this, and it's wrong, I feel like I have to address it. But now I want to make everyone mad, not just Democrats. Let's make Republicans mad too, so that we're fair. I don't think Democrats are the only ones doing this, right? I don't think Democratic politicians are the only one who are using Christianity as a tool. Honestly, I think Trump does this too. And again, I cannot see motives, either James's or Trump's or anyone else. But what I see is, I saw the podcast with Lex Friedman and Trump back when he was campaigning. And at the very end of the podcast, he says, you know, that's what religion's for, right? It's to get to heaven. And if you're good, you'll go to heaven. And that is not what Christianity teaches. Christianity teaches that none of us are good enough for heaven. And so Jesus had to come down from heaven to save us, that he had to sacrifice himself in order to save us from our sins. And so Trump has this he has this complete misunderstanding of the teaching of salvation in Christianity. That again, this broad understanding of Jesus coming down from heaven to save us because we can't get to heaven ourselves, that's agreed. Protestant, Eastern Orthodox, Catholicism, we all agree on that. And so I just have to ask the question of why are we doing this? And better yet, can we please, politicians, can you stop using Christianity as a tool to further your own political agenda? And so if you're someone who just wants to know exactly what Jesus taught, said, and what he stood for, like this channel's for you. I'm not going to pull any punches either way. I don't care. In a sense, I don't care which side the New Testament supports. I don't care if this New Testament text supports Democrats or if it supports Republicans, as long as I read the text right. Like as a Christian, I'm Jesus first. I'm not a political party first. So now that we've got that out of the way, let's look at it, because this video is specifically about abortion and homosexuality. So let's look at the actual teachings of Jesus related to these things. And so the first claim that James makes in his podcast with Joe Rogan is that Jesus never taught on homosexuality. And this statement is one of those half-truths that gets clicks. It's just true enough that it makes people go, oh, that's interesting. Okay, I guess homosexuality is okay. Because the whole point of that statement is a hidden statement underneath, is that Jesus thinks homosexuality is okay. That's really the claim behind the claim, is if Jesus never taught about it, that means it's fine, which is not the case. That's like if you were to say, it'd be very unfair to say, most Christian pastors in America have never taught a sermon on the horrors of slavery and why slavery is bad. Therefore, all of those Christian pastors support slavery. That's just not true. In America, we pretty much are all on the same page at this point. Slavery, bad thing, bad idea. We don't want that. And so you don't have to teach it. Like there's no reason for me to go traveling around the country, standing on stage and doing an exposition of why slavery is bad for society or anything like that, because we all agree slavery's bad. And it's the same thing in Jesus's context with homosexuality. He was primarily teaching to a Jewish audience in the first century. He was in Palestine. He was born in Bethlehem, grew up in Nazareth, and did most of his ministry in Galilee, and then he went to Jerusalem near the end of his life. Like this whole context was a Jewish context, and they all agreed on this issue of homosexuality, so there was no reason to actually bring it up. Now, when Jesus sends some of his apostles and disciples to go teach, to go spread the gospel to the Greco-Roman world, now you have people like the Apostle Paul who is bringing up homosexuality in Romans chapter 1 because it fits the context, because it's actually a context in which this is being practiced. And so now you have to talk about it. You have to say, okay, no, you have to define what is, not just what is right, but also what are the incorrect behaviors. And so that leads kind of to the second point of Jesus doesn't teach against homosexuality, but he does teach what is a proper sexual relationship. What is marriage? And it's in Matthew 19. Let me just read this really quick and then we'll talk about it. Then some Pharisees came to him in order to test him. They asked, "Is it lawful to divorce a wife for any cause?" He answered, "Have you not read that from the beginning the Creator made them male and female and said, 'For this reason a man will leave his father and mother and will be united with his wife, and the two will become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore what God has joined together, let no one separate.'" What Jesus does here is he defines marriage as between a man and a woman for life. That's it. That is the only correct definition of marriage according to Jesus. And so what I would say is if you disagree with that, and I don't want this to sound insensitive, but you don't have to be a Christian. There's nothing forcing anyone in our society to actually be a Christian. You don't get a higher pay because you're a Christian. You don't get better jobs because you're a Christian. There's not really any social benefit to be. Maybe 100, 200 years ago there was, but today there's nothing forcing anyone to be a Christian if they disagree with Christian doctrine. I just don't like when people reinterpret Christian doctrine to fit their own preferences. It's like Jesus defined marriage a certain way, and that's how he defined it. And so this is kind of like, to give another example, this is kind of like our current hot topics that are really starting to ramp up in like philosophical circles and stuff is AI and like gene cloning. At what point do you start treating artificial intelligence or a clone of an individual as a person, as a human being. Like, what is personhood? We know that the U.S. has already established that every single person ought to be given the opportunity for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Like these are fundamental rights of a human being. And so we already have this foundation, but now as we evolve as a society, or we continue to grow and change, and technology improves and changes, we have to start asking ourselves, okay, we have this principle that every human being has rights. How does that apply to AI if AI achieves true consciousness? Or how does that, if science gets to the point where it can literally clone me, and there's another version of me, has all my DNA, has his own brain, body, consciousness, everything, does that clone have rights? Or do I own the clone? Is that slavery? And so we're taking a fundamental principle and we're applying it to a new situation. That's exactly what Jesus does, and then the New Testament does. Jesus gives us the principle of defining a marriage. And then when Paul goes to a new context in the Greco-Roman world, he's just applying that to a new context. He's saying marriage is defined this way. That means homosexuality is outside of those bounds. Now, the second claim that he makes is that the Bible condones abortion. Like, abortion is okay. And his primary text for doing that, he's got two, but the first one is, he goes all the way back to Genesis 1. And he says, when God breathes life into Adam, that's when he has life. And so James's point is, a baby's not alive until they breathe. And they don't breathe in the womb, therefore they're not alive in the womb. And so once they are delivered and they take that first breath and they start crying, now they're alive. I would say one of the major problems here is that Adam was never conceived. Like, Adam was formed from the dust, and so it's using an exception to the standard rule of how humans are made to then inform us about the standard operating procedure. But second, there's plenty of places in the Old Testament that talk about God knitting or designing the baby in the womb of the mother. And so there's this clear intentionality by God for design even before the baby is born. And so if God is the one designing it, then we as humans do not have the right to stop that design. So there's just a clear emphasis on the intentionality of even the fetus. But then also his second supporting evidence for this is that he says that Jesus is extremely pro-woman in the scripture, in the Gospels. And I would completely agree with that, just like I hope every single other Christian would. He truly treated his women disciples and women in general as equals. And he did not play favorites between men and women or anything like that. But for some reason, James makes the argument, then he makes a jump that because Jesus treated women equally, therefore he would be okay with abortion. And there is no logical connection there. There is no reason to think that. In fact, Jesus is treating a group of oppressed people better than the culture said they deserved before it was popular. Now it's common knowledge and it's popular to say men and women are equal. But back then that was not popular to say. He was defending an oppressed and marginalized group. And so if anything, if you take that model of what he was doing and you apply it to today, who is the most oppressed group of people in the world right now? The unborn child. The unborn fetus is more oppressed and in need of more protection than any other people group in America or probably the world. And so if Jesus is on anyone's side, he's on the side of the oppressed. He's on the side of the ones who cannot defend themselves, and he is defending them. That's what women were like in the first century. They could not defend themselves, and yet Jesus stepped into their life. And his first announcement that he's Messiah, that he is the Son of God, come to save humanity, the first person he tells is a Samaritan woman. Not only is she hated by the Jews because she's Samaritan, but she's a woman, and so she's not respected in society. And yet Jesus makes her the object of his very first announcement that he is the Messiah come to save humanity. And so if that's not a high value of someone who is oppressed, I don't know what is. And so if Jesus were in today's world, I have absolutely no doubt that he would be on the side of the oppressed, i.e. the unborn child, who is more oppressed than any other people group in the country or in the world. And so the last claim that James makes is kind of this plea for respectful dialogue. He says, I have friends who are anti-abortion. I respect their position, and I want to be able to have a dialogue with them about that. And I do agree to some degree that no matter what we're discussing, we always need to love and respect the person who is made in the image of God, and not demean or anything like that. But on the other hand, I do think there are times to be absolutely, unequivocally repulsed by an idea. And this is one of those instances. Like, if we were to sit across the room and there was someone who was saying that like the Holocaust was okay, we would be up in arms about it. Like, I don't think people would remain calm. Now, we probably wouldn't, like, it would be unproductive to shout at the person or get angry or things like that, but we would work our tails off to try and make sure that person has no influence or no say in political decisions or things like that. And let's just play the if-then game here. Let's be hypothetical, theoretical. If it is true, like, I'm asking people who don't agree with me to stand in my shoes for a minute. If it's true that the unborn child truly is a human and aborting them is equal to murder, then it is clear that the rampant abortion issue in the world today is far worse than the Holocaust. It is by far the greatest catastrophe in human existence, resulting in more deaths of human beings than has ever occurred in the past. You may not agree with the if part, but can you at least see where I'm coming from and where Christians are coming from when they say abortion is really bad? It's because that's how we view it. We view them as the most oppressed people group in the history of humanity, and we want to advocate for their rights when they can't advocate for themselves. When they're the minority group, not in the sense of number count, but in ability to communicate. They have no ability to defend themselves. They are the weakest of society, and we want to protect them because we think that they are made in the image of God, just like any other human. And so they deserve respect and dignity like the rest of us. And so, yes, I agree with James saying we need to have healthy dialogues that are respectful and loving. I don't think shouting at anyone's going to help, but I think being adamant and very clear on our position and why we think someone like James should not have any position to dictate important policies about life is because of that. Is because of how serious we take this specific issue. So those are my main disagreements with James and why I disagree with him. Now I want to take a step back and I just want to look again at Jesus' teaching of what are we saying here? What is a Christian saying when they say homosexuality and abortion are sinful? Like, just because something's sinful doesn't mean God doesn't love you. In fact, the gospel message is that every single one of us has messed up. I have messed up, and my sin is no less severe than someone who's committed homosexuality or committed abortion. In God's eyes, it's all equal. It's all sinful. And so the gospel message is that every single person is messed up. And every single person is in need of being saved. And the only person who can save is Jesus. That we were dead in our sins, but Jesus came to earth to save us and make us alive together with God. And what does that actually mean when we're dead and alive and all this kind of stuff? It's like God is creator. He created everything. And which means he's got a rule book. He's got a manual for how to live. Just like how to take care of and drive a car. A car has a manual that tells you how to use it. If you go against that manual, there's a good chance the car is going to break. In the same way, because God is the creator of life, he's got this life manual that tells us how to operate in this life. And the key principle within that is having a good and right relationship with God so that you can flourish. Unfortunately, when we disobeyed him and when we go our own way, when we decide to follow our own desires instead of God's will for our lives, we break that relationship. It's like the analogy I use all the time is a river. If God is the source of life, like a river that has a source of water and it's running down, sin is like a boulder that slams down into the middle of the river and it blocks the path of water. And so sin has blocked our connection to God, and it has caused it so that life can no longer flow into us. And so that's why the result of sin is death, both physical and spiritual death. And the only way to remove that boulder is for Jesus to deal with sin. And so the offer, this is why I always say that Christianity is the most tolerant or the most inclusive religion there is. Not because Christianity agrees with everyone about everything. That's impossible. Every religion has their principles and their beliefs, but because two doctrines are applied to every single person equally, without exception. On the one hand, every single one of us is sinful. That's the ultimate equalizer. We are equal because we are all sinful before God. But the second half is that we can all receive forgiveness from Jesus. That offer is given to every single person, no matter what language you speak, no matter what ethnicity you are, no matter what country you're from, no matter what socioeconomic status you have. Like, the ultimate equalizer is both you're sinful and you're loved. That Jesus wants to save you. But if you disagree with Jesus's definition of sin, then you won't think you need salvation. And so Christianity is not for you. I'm saying I think this is the truth of ultimate reality, but if you disagree with me, that is okay. We can both go on living our own lives and in a respectful and loving way. That's what I agree with James about. But I think it's unfair to tell Christians to be quiet about this kind of stuff because it's political. When, again, this is not a political podcast. Only when it encroaches on my beliefs and on Christian doctrine do I think that it's necessary for me to speak up. And in these two instances, both with abortion and homosexuality, James is making the claim that Christianity doesn't say or doesn't hold the beliefs that everyone thinks it does. And I'm like, no, actually, that's the historic position of the Christian faith. And so I think it's worth talking about. All right, that is it for this video. If you want to study the New Testament more in depth and you want to learn more about it, the ins and outs of Jesus's life, of the New Testament letters, of things like that, then feel free to subscribe. Join me here. I try to post every week. And again, like, my biggest concern is what does the Bible actually say in its historical context? And there's a lot of nuance to that, certainly. I'm not saying there's not nuance in interpreting scripture. But there are some things that are just blatantly wrong, and that's something that we discuss in this video. And there will be other things that we talk about along the way, but I do always want to bring nuance while also bringing clarity to the text of the New Testament. So that's all. See you next time. Thanks for watching.